What if the thing that's hunting you isn't a monster in the dark, but the building itself, remembering everything it's ever swallowed? In this episode, I'm joined once again by author Blaine Daigle, whose latest novel, Porcelain Lullaby, distills years of writing on childhood trauma, fractured families, and gothic dread into one of his most intimate and unsettling stories yet. We talk about Meadowland, an abandoned orphanage that feels less like a setting and more like a predator, the brothers whose opposing memories power the narrative, and why lullabies, little shadows, and lonely places make the perfect vehicles for terror. This is the Dark Mind Podcast. If you enjoy the show, please support it by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support helps keep the dark conversation alive. So without further ado, I give you Blaine Daigle. Blaine, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Vince.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on this 7th day of February 2026. As always, I was thrilled when you reached out about a new book, and Porcelain Lullaby was no exception to your already impressive bibliography. Filled with family trauma, toxic dynamics, and the heartbreaking thresher that orphan children are thrown into, it's a fearless exploration of childhood trauma. So I really appreciate you bringing that honesty to your work, and I'm excited to have you on the show today.
Well, thanks for reading. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's really exactly kind of what I was going for.
You always hit the nail right on the head. So to give a brief synopsis, Porcelain Lullaby is about two brothers, Jake and Nate Shepard, whose childhood ended in violence. After a night of horror, they woke to find their parents dead, an unspeakable tragedy that cracked their psyches and left them orphaned. 2 decades later, the brothers barely speak to each other. The weight of that night is too heavy for either to confront. But when they receive a message from their long-dead mother, a phrase only she would know, they're called to an abandoned orphanage called Meadowland in rural Pennsylvania, and that's where the story really takes off. So when you say Porcelain Lullaby is the place where all your other books were, quote, leading toward, what dimension of that story feels most like the endpoint of something you've been slowly closing in on?
I think more than anything, it just feels as though a lot of the themes and a lot of the concepts that I've had in previous works have sort of evolved, and this is sort of like their natural evolutionary end. I think that, a lot of ways I've talked about things like childhood trauma before. I've talked about like cracked family dynamics before. I've talked about all that in other books. And I feel as though with each book, I seem to, in my own mind, take it a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. And whenever I was writing Porcelain Lullaby, I just kind of realized, in the throes of creating it, like this is really kind of where it's all been leading. Like this is, I feel like at this point, that part of my writing has been distilled down into where in my own mind, this is basically as far as in my mind I can take this. Like this is just the natural endpoint. So it always just kind of felt, whether it was the trauma aspect, whether it was the grief horror aspect, whether it was, the use of atmosphere, the family dynamics, whatever the case may be, those things that have been present, throughout the previous 4 books it's like a distillery process, it's just kind of gotten to this point at its most concise, it's most direct. This is the where it's always been leading.
So is there still somewhere to go? Is there some you were talking about distilled, is there some grief moonshine still, or are you talking about like pivoting to a different dynamic or subject matter?
A little bit of both. I mean, I think that, for example, one of the things that keeps coming up is people talk about this book being a gothic horror story, and I didn't write it as such. Like that wasn't what I intended to do. My last book, I wrote it very specifically to be gothic. This one I didn't. And I was talking to, Andrew Nyberg, and he was just like, dude, you're a gothic horror writer. I was like, that's just kind of what you are. It's just kind of where it's gone. So I think that within the genre, I think there's a lot more playroom. And I think there's different aspects of the genre that I can tackle. I really actually struggled this past year. I stopped and started a bunch of books and what I kind of realized toward the end was, I would get so frustrated with them. I'd be like, I'd get, 15,000 words into it. I'm like, I don't know where this is going, blah, blah, blah. Or I do like my little pre-writing stuff. And I'm like, I just don't see it. And I think it kind of dawned on me the reason why was because I was trying to do the same things that I'd been doing. And I knew they weren't as good as Porcelain. I knew that, at this point it was, I don't ever want to be redundant, or I don't ever want to be, derivative of my own work. So it was like, I felt like I was like, for the first time in my writing journey, I felt like I was repeating myself. So, whether that's, looking for new avenues within this gothic framework, whether that's, maybe trying different genres out, not genres, let's say subgenres. I'm still writing horror, for God's sakes. But, whether that's the case or whatever the case may be, I think that there's without doubt still some juice left. I just, maybe this particular aspect has reached where I think it needed to go.
Hmm. So, I mean, I can totally see like the porcelain dolls, kind of that Victorian era, contributing to the genre of gothic. I didn't happen to look, is there a audiobook for this yet?
Not yet. It's signed.
Is it going to be Jennifer Pickens?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I know. It's going to be Joe Hempel's going to do it.
Okay.
It's through Podium, and I haven't gotten any kind of information about when it's going to be ready. I know Joe's been working on it.
No shade on you, Joe. I don't know you.
Joe's fantastic.
Yeah.
I did, however, say, because I mean, obviously you've read the book, that there is one part of the book that does switch for one chapter to a female perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And Podium Audio gives out these little like questionnaires that we have to fill out that like kind of tell them things like, okay, who do you have in mind? Do you have someone in mind? Things like that. And for that one chapter, I was like, look, if you guys can get Jennifer Pickens to come back for this one chapter, that would be great.
Yeah.
I don't know if she is, but obviously she blew me away with her work on Ashes of August Manor.
Yeah, I guess she would be having to do an awful lot of male dialogue.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the reasons. Like, I've done audiobooks, but they've all been nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just can't do voice acting because I just can't. Even if for just a second break into a feminine voice, I just feel like I can't pull it off.
I've heard a few where it's like they do that, where like they'll call in if let's say you have a book that's like a female point of view most of the way, but you have like one or two chapters where it does switch to a male perspective, they'll get a male narrator to come in and do those one or two chapters. Then again, personally, I think Jennifer's talented enough. I have no doubt she could have probably pulled it off.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the brothers are estranged by the time we meet them as adults. When you were building their relationship, what was the exact moment in your mind when their bond broke beyond casual drift?
I think that just having them be brothers, number one, and just knowing, kind of where my stories tend to go. And I think in a lot of ways, their relationship is sort of the antithesis to what we saw in A Dark Rue with Rhett and Rhiannon, where their bond is kind of the glue that holds that whole story together. Whereas in, Porcelain Lullaby, it's a lot more like their estrangement is what kind of holds the whole story together. And I think that it was that decision that, that they were going to have vastly different perspectives of what happened on that night with their mother, and Nate going the way that he went, Jake going the way that he went, because all the tension in the story hinges on how those two brothers saw that night. So, like I said, this is the second time where I've really, had sibling relationships be in the forefront. Whereas the first time I did it, it was two siblings who had the same real perspective, just maybe different levels of it. Whereas this one was just, diametrically opposed in terms of what they remembered. So I think for me, that's where the story started. It was just the idea of, Jake and Nate having these two wildly separate interpretations, and those interpretations driving their characters. Nate really leaning into the supernatural aspect of things, whereas Jake kind of starts to worry about himself and what's inside him, threatening to come out at any moment.
Yeah, that's weird. Like with my childhood, there was no murder suicide, I assure you. But, there's no such thing really as a functional family. So some issues that happened when I was younger, it is kind of weird how differently myself and my brother remember them. And we're really not we're like 18 months apart. So it's not like we were on different maturity levels or anything. We're pretty close together. Do you have any experience like that? I can't even remember if you have siblings.
I have two sisters. One is 2 years younger than me, and then one is 13 years younger than me.
Oh, wow.
She was an oops baby. Love you, Carly. But
apparently those are the most fun.
Yeah, I obviously I don't have specific traumatizing examples. I think me and my dad were joking not long ago. I feel like I have to make this announcement publicly based on the stuff that I've written. I did not have a traumatic childhood. My childhood was actually very, very good. I come from a very stable home. So obviously I don't have any childhood trauma and things like that, but I do, me and my sisters will remember certain aspects of our childhood a little bit differently, despite the fact that we were both there, or all three of us were there for that experience. There's also the question of how much you can even really trust your memory. I think, I've heard Andrew Van Wade talk about this, where it's your memory is incredibly, after a certain time goes by, your memory becomes almost untrustworthy. You can't trust what you remember because your mind replaces certain things, or it's almost I've heard stories of people who have if you tell a lie for so long, you legitimately begin to believe that that is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain just starts to fill in those gaps, and so. Who knows? Me and my sister, the one that's 2 years younger than me, we're remembering stuff when we were 6 and 4. Who knows which one of those stories, if either, was accurate at all?
Yeah, and I forget. There's they labeled it as some sort of a phenomenon, although I don't think it's a scientific word, whatever it is that's escaping my memory. But basically, you remember a line from a movie that you maybe allude to, or it's an inside joke between you and your friends or your wife or something like that. And then you see the movie again, you're like, oh, he didn't say it like that, or that wasn't the way it was said. Luke, I am your father.
Right. No, I am your father. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Or what's the other one?
I had one just recently, the other day, where I was remembering the line where it was a war movie, and the line was the guy says, "Our arrows will blot out the sun," and the guy responds with, "Then we will fight in the shade," which is from the movie 300.
Uh-huh.
I swore that was from Kingdom of Heaven.
Oh, okay.
And I was I know that is from Kingdom of Heaven, because Kingdom of Heaven came out 5 years prior to the 300. I remember it from being a kid, and I was like, no way. So I looked it up on YouTube, and sure enough, it was 300. I'm I swear I swear on everything that I saw that in a Kingdom of Heaven trailer.
Yeah, the worst thing is when you're so sure and you get into an argument with somebody and you bet the money.
Yeah.
$20. It doesn't even have to be that much. Just sucks.
Yep.
Well, circling back to the book, Nate leans toward a supernatural culprit while Jake worries about something inside the family line. What interested you about building the conflict around explanations instead of just events?
I think events, when you write a story, you obviously have story beats and the events follow those beats. And those are actions that are happening throughout the course of a story. And I thought the idea of an explanation and like that being the central conflict between the two of them, not so much what happened, but more of well, what did you think happened? Because what happened, especially when you're writing, I'm putting it on the page, I'm telling you what happened. Meanwhile, as opposed to kind of keeping it all behind the page, so to speak, like for instance, like the situation that Jake and Nate go through as children is never on the page. You simply see the before and you see the after. You're told what happened, but you're told it from two different perspectives. And then there's the objective truth about what happened, which is that two people ended up dead. And then there's the explanation. Okay, well, how did that happen? And I thought that being able to play on the mystery of how it happened as opposed to, oh, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, made for, in my mind, a much more compelling psychological narrative as opposed to something more visceral and, action driven.
Yeah, I was thinking about also the way I'm going to admit how scatterbrained I am. Which one was younger?
Jake was younger, but not by very much. Like the difference between you and your brother is pretty much the difference between Nate and Jake.
Okay, so which one was trying to put the blood back in to fix the cracks?
That was Nate.
Okay, so the younger one?
The older one.
The older one. Okay. All right. Okay, because I was wondering about that dynamic. Is it because it seemed like more of a childlike thing to do, but he was also the one. Oh God, I'm gonna screw this up so bad. He was also the one that subscribed to the supernatural.
Yes, but I will say that it's easy to make that mistake because what I did with the characters is I kind of flip them. So when you first meet Nate and Jake, they're in their home and they're talking about hearing things at night. And it's Jake is the one who is saying it's like, a monster in the walls or something like that. And Nate's the one who's saying that like, no, dude, come on, chill out. There's nothing there. It's nothing supernatural. And then when the event happens, the two flip. It's almost like Jake goes from the imagining of the monster to the realization of the real life horror. He flips and Nate does the opposite. It's almost like Nate can't grasp the realization of the horror and he reverts into the invisible monster.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, speaking of supernatural, the message from their long dead mother is a brutal hook. When you wrote it, what did you want the reader to feel first? Hope, dread, or anger at being pulled back in?
Well, to be entirely honest, I pretty much just ripped off Silent Hill 2 with that one.
Everybody makes so many references to that, and it's a video game, right?
Yeah, and
I don't play video games, so I never know what they're talking about.
Well, the whole point of it is you're playing as a character who receives a letter from his dead wife calling him to Silent Hill. And Silent Hill isn't the first one to do it. It's the message from beyond the veil. And that's a trope that's been used for centuries at this point. And this was really just kind of my spin on it. I thought it was like, it's interesting. And then in terms of what would I want the reader to get out of it, I was going for dread. I didn't want, I didn't think it was a hopeful thing because I think I even had like Nate saying at one point, like, no, this is like mom is dead. Like it is something else is essentially using her voice. And to me, that was always the point that I wanted to get across. I never wanted it to be like oh, well, we have to go and save mom. It's like, no, they're fully aware that this is not their mother because they saw their mother. They know what happened to their mother. They know this is not her. This is something else.
Okay. Well, the music box is a classic horror trope, but here you kind of augment it, making it act almost as like a Geiger counter for the past or for just the supernatural, as if it's like a form of radiation.
Mm-hmm.
Why is music, specifically a lullaby, such an effective vehicle for terror? Is it because a lullaby is the first time we're told it's safe to close our eyes when it might not be? Or, I don't know.
Well, I mean, just think about what lullaby means. It lulls you into a false sense of security. it's dark. You are at your most vulnerable. You are not awake. You are not alert, and it lulls you into thinking that everything is going to be okay. And obviously, usually it is, but what if it's not? And to me, that was the whole idea of it. Was a dichotomy. Whereas this noise is supposed to be this calming and soothing thing, and it's anything but that. It's basically a sign that shit's about to get very, very real. So it's lulling you into that false sense of security where I'm going to be okay, while knowing that that's an illusion. And I think like illusions and facades play a really, really big role in this book, specifically facades. And so to me, not only did it have that effect, it also kind of ties into a lot of the themes of the book, dealing with like the broken glass and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really just an inducer of dread, just to like, you're unsure in your head, like, am I alone? Is there something nefarious in the room with me? Oh, confirmation. You hear that. It's weird how things that are pleasant, you just, like you associate something bad with them or move one thing off, like Johnny Compton. We were talking about this same thing, and he brought up that old episode of The Simpsons where Bart was flying kites in the dark. I was like, yeah, a kid flying a kite is just, it's kind of a pleasant thing. You see him outside in the dark, it's like, wow, that's kind of weird, kind of off-putting and spooky.
And I got the idea to do that from, if you ever watch like those ghost hunter shows that like they'll go into like spooky places and they'll do good ghost hunting. One of the little devices that they use is a music box, but what it is for them, it's like a mousetrap basically. And the idea is that if like a presence passes in front of it, that it'll kick the music box on and it'll turn, it'll spin, and it plays like a little jingle. And I was like, I like the idea of that. This thing that, like you said, it was like a Geiger counter almost. Like it's detecting the radiation in the room. Which is a really cool way of thinking about the ghost too. But I was like, well, how can I take that and make that creepier than just, oh, it's a jingle? I was like, well, first off, instead of having that little mousetrap, let's do an actual music box, like with the ballerina inside spinning around, everything like that. And let's make it like a lullaby, like that notion of calm, that notion of like solitude and all of that serenity. And then have it juxtaposed with what the serenity actually means, which is that there's something else here.
Yeah, I cannot. I mean, unless I'm shown some really specific phenomenon, I cannot accept that EVP. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, there's just too many things flying through the air, all sorts of radio frequencies being talked on by portable radios, law enforcement, public service personnel. Just it's too much. Now, if you let me listen to something where somebody is clearly calling out somebody's name and it's not just a hoax, then I might believe it. But just randomly ascribing these characteristics to just static basically just drives me nuts when I see people doing that on television.
Yeah, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the shows because, like, obviously there's a lot where I'm just like, you are so full of shit. And then there's some where I'm like, okay, that was actually kind of freaking creepy. Like, okay, okay. So yeah, I won't lie. I have a love-hate relationship with them. I mean, I can't help it. I'm from Louisiana, man. You can't throw a rock down here and not hit a haunted house. Like,
yeah.
It's kind of built into the framework.
Yeah. Yeah. And when they're doing the shows, wherever they're exploring, sometimes they hit pay dirt, but sometimes they don't, and they still have to make a living. So,
and I think that's a part of the book where I talk about Jake. Not Jake. I'm sorry, Nate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Where he's like, the stuff that he knows is the ghost is not what's going to get people to watch the show. So he has to sit there and do all these little tricks on the camera. And he hates it. Like, he's like, I hate doing this. Like, it's the worst part of this.
Yeah, it's like watching somebody fire a machine gun on a movie or something like that. You're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But you see somebody just popping steady shots out of a 9mm or something like that. Oh, that's boring. But if you actually pop shots out of a 9mm in real life, it's not boring.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a difference. So yeah. Definitely, the intensity of an act does not translate very well to film. You got to go really over the top.
Yeah.
Well, circling back to the book, the 1977 timeline with journalist Brittany McNamara shows a town that knows about Meadowland's history but keeps it buried. How does collective denial change the physics of a haunting compared to a secret kept by one person?
I think a secret kept by one person, you have one story. And I think that anytime you have a town or a larger group of people, there you're going to get differing perspectives, you're going to get differing viewpoints. And I was listening to your show actually with John Cohn when he was talking about Creed Falls massacres, and he was talking about like that calcifying effect of years gone by of a town where you have differences in opinions, or maybe confirmed, confirmation biases, where the whole town believes like, oh, that place is haunted. Okay, well, time goes by where it's never proven it's not. Well, that's going to calcify that belief. And I think in a lot of ways it ties back into the notion that places can kind of have auras and attitudes. And a lot of time those auras and attitudes stem from the way that other people talk about them, the mystique that kind of builds behind them. Where, if you go to visit an old abandoned orphanage, okay, that's creepy in and of itself, right? You go to visit an old abandoned orphanage where the entire walk through, like up to the orphanage, you're being told by every single person you talk to, that place is hell. I can hear the children screaming sometimes. That's going to have a significantly more impact on you, right? So that was kind of, what I was going for with that was like, I wanted that calcified real effect of how attitudes and stories of people in proximity can create an aura or an attitude of a place.
Yeah. I mean, I know when people say memes, they're talking about things you post on the internet, but would that be an example of what literal memes are?
Not sure.
Let me see. Because when it comes to like evolutionary psychology, meme, an image, video piece, blah, 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 an element of culture or system of behavior passed from one visual to another by imitation or other non-genetic means.
So yeah, kind of. That's the way stories work.
Yeah. Yeah, they just get memed into existence by being repeated.
It's kind of like, the idea of like every small town's got a haunted house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, sir. Well, you make, we've kind of alluded to them already, but you make, quote, little figures lurking in the shadows sound simple on paper, but terrifying in practice. What is it about small, silent things that make them feel more personal than a big monster?
Because I think the big monster is wholly separate from the protagonist or the character, whatever the case may be. So like if you have the character who is fighting the big monster, they are in direct conflict with an external force. Well, when you're in combat or conflict with an external force, you can fight. All of a sudden it's more physical than it is psychological. Whereas little shadows is something that doesn't really exist in an external method. Even shadows themselves are not actually there. They're just perceptions of what we see when there's an absence of light where we expect light to be. So I think that the whole point of the little shadows aspect was like tying into the uncertainty aspect of Jake and Nate's entire journey, the uncertainty of what actually happened that fateful night when they were children, the explanations of, okay, well, is that just a trick of the light, which is the murder, suicide, logical, no supernatural, or is that something standing there, which ties more into the supernatural? So it just kind of keeps playing on that dichotomy between the two of them and the way that they see both the world and the way that they see what happened to their mother.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your nightmare. Now, I know you do book covers. Did you do this one?
I did. This was actually, I'm actually kind of stepping away from them, and this is like the last one that I did.
Really? Why are you stepping away from them?
It's a lot of work and a lot of time that I think is probably better spent on me writing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But
I love everything about this cover. And it came by completely by accident. Like I knew what I kind of wanted, but the cracked facade, I think ended up looking fantastic. And the only reason it happened was obviously your audio listeners are not gonna have any freaking idea what I'm talking about right now.
Check out the video on Spotify or YouTube.
But I was placing the crack on the doll's face, and it was just a simple crack graphic, like no depth to it whatsoever. And somehow I accidentally hit duplicate as I did it, and it duplicated, I think, 3 times. I don't know why, but it did. And for some reason, when it did that, it gave the resulting image a little bit of depth and also some kind of texture. And I don't know where that little texture came from, but it actually really does now look as though the cracks are truly on the doll's face. And when that happened, I was like, oh, hell yeah. That was the happiest accident I could have ever asked for.
Was it an accident?
It was totally.
Was it the image becoming sentient?
Oh, possibly so. They'll sell books.
Yeah. Well, do you find, compared to when you've done them yourself and contracted them out, can you get the same satisfaction of, yeah, this is exactly what I want?
Oh yeah, you can.
Okay.
I mean, so I've written 5 books, and 3 of them, the covers have been done by me, which was Dark Rue, Ashes of August Manor, and Porcelain Lullaby. And then Christian Bentelin did the covers for Broken Places and A Dark and Endless Sea. And both of those are great. And I don't know if I'll ever truly be able to recapture the feeling of seeing the cover for the Broken Places the first time. I think if you have a good artist that listens and understands and is willing to take, your own opinions or feelings into account, you can get a result that just absolutely nails what you were going for. I think I always thought Broken Places' cover was fantastic, and that cover happened because I had like a basic, like I had made my own, because when I thought I was going to self-publish it, and I sent it to him like hey, this is kind of like a mock-up of something I was thinking. And then he took that mock-up, worked with it, took what he knew about the story, and then created the final cover, which I thought was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, is there a special satisfaction in doing it yourself and being able to really kind of tailor it to what the book is about? Yeah, absolutely. But I think also there's so many talented designers out there that are able to completely replicate that feeling just through sheer ability. Because I mean, I'm very limited in what I can actually do, and a lot of my covers rely on kind of tricks, like I just told you about the trick with the cracks. And some of these other cover designers are able to do that without having to resort to those kind of tricks. So yeah, I think that there's too much talent out there for it not to be able to have that same feeling.
Yeah, I mean, if you get an incredibly talented and competent designer, I bet the sheer excitement of not knowing what's about to be sprung on you, and then if it hits just right, you're like that, I don't know, maybe almost feeling of uneasiness, like, wow, he or she really got in my head.
Yeah, and it happens anytime you have anybody involved in the story besides you. I had the exact same feeling whenever I listened to the audiobook of Ashes of August Manor that Jennifer Pickens did, where it was like, holy crap, she absolutely understood everything I was going for. And it's a really cool it really is a cool feeling. It's just like, dang, like you were in my head. I had to have been, because this is perfect.
I wish I could play like a 30-second snippet, but just to let people realize it. But yeah, that would trigger copyright. But
go to Audible, listen to the sample.
Yeah, go to Audible, listen to the sample. I actually bought that for do you know Lashane Arnett?
Yes.
Friend of the show. Yeah, she was laid up recovering from some surgery, and I bought her a copy of the book, the audiobook to listen to.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, one reviewer said the book scared them in a way horror rarely does anymore. Not just creeped out, but actually scared. What do you think you tapped into that hit differently than standard haunted building stories?
I have no idea.
No?
I mean, so that has been a pretty common thing where people talk about how scary the book is. And I don't know if consciously I did anything differently with this one versus some of the other ones that may have been more just basically creepy. I think if I had to diagnose it and I had to like analyze it, perhaps maybe it was because of how uniquely personal everything is to the characters, and maybe the characters themselves. Like I knew that when I wrote it, that Jake was going to be a character that people were going to have pretty strong opinions on, whether they liked him or didn't like him. And the majority of people who have read it and, gotten back to me about how they felt was like, I didn't like him for the first 230 pages. And then the last 50, I really liked him. And because it was the way his arc ended. But he was interesting enough that I kept going. And I think that because this is so personal to the brothers, and I think that people could potentially gravitate toward one of the two. They could gravitate toward Nate, they could gravitate toward Jake, and yet both of them are experiencing really kind of creepy stuff in different ways. I think maybe that has something to do with it, but it wasn't like it was anything I did consciously. I didn't write this thinking like, oh, this is the scariest thing I've written. It was just like, oh, okay, like this is my general thing. I'm going for atmosphere. I'm going for dread. I'm going for creep. And then also, I mean, the second half of the book literally takes place in a haunted, abandoned orphanage. Like, I don't know. And then, I think maybe perhaps too the doll aspect with the Uncanny Valley, maybe that has something to do with it as well. It's something like the whole Uncanny Valley aspect isn't something I've really ever tapped into before this book. So perhaps that plays into it. But I don't really know exactly what it was that set this one apart from others in terms of like fear.
Well, at the beginning of the show, you mentioned, or like I think my first question was the reference to kind of the end goal, or the word you used was like a distillation, so a concentration, so everything kind of coming to a head all at once. Maybe it's a lot scarier than you thought. Like you understood the concept is coming to a concentrated endpoint, but maybe not considering like, yeah, it's equally as scary.
Perhaps so. I mean, like I know that there's some through lines here, and maybe something as simple as like I know with the broken places, the scene that a lot of people talk about, the two scenes that people talk about in that book are the scenes with the deer in the road and the scenes with the animals outside the cabin as being like the quote scary scenes in the book. And in a lot of ways, I think that what Nate sees, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but what Nate sees is like that. But instead of the separation of it just being animals acting weird, he sees it in something significantly more personal and maybe a little closer to home for most readers than simply, oh, it's an animal acting strange. So maybe so. Maybe it is just like you said, like a concentration of everything else, and you get a concentrated dose as opposed to a watered down version.
Yeah, the broken places in a dark and endless sea. I know what it technically is isolation, but it's a sort of isolation where you almost feel like you've just fallen off the edge of the earth. Like you are in no way ever in hope of contacting humans ever again. Like it's weird how, especially a dark and endless sea, that was just like, wow, you are going to go insane from the way I forget what the name of that one guy was. They made a movie about it. Kevin Bacon played him, where they kept him in solitary confinement for I think months, years, something.
I've seen that one.
Oh, it's dark. Yeah. I mean, you're already in prison, so how do they punish you? They make you go half insane, putting you in solitary confinement. They completely cut off the source of human contact, which, even if you're an introvert, nobody ever gets rid of the need for social contact,
Oh God, yeah. We can all sit here and we run our mouths constantly about, oh, I can't stand being around people. I would love to go live out in the mountains somewhere or be away. The simple fact of the matter is we are social beings by nature. You need other people around you, because if you do not have that, you start to lose a little bit of your grip on whether it's the world or society, wherever the case may be. Like it starts to loosen a little bit.
Yeah, like it's almost like you need to mirror each other so that you can, maintain your humanity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you kind of go feral in a sense.
Yeah,
Like
it's
you,
almost it's like you've got to have the image to like to hold on to.
yeah,
Whether it's the mirror image or whatever the case may be, even if it's a mirror image, like if something is completely opposite of you and you like look at that thing in terms of like let's say like I think this particular person is morally reprehensible. Well, I need to keep that image in my head of what morally reprehensible is, lest I begin to become morally reprehensible because I cannot hold on to my ethos of what is good and what is bad.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I may be talking out of my ass here, but I don't think we were able to develop empathy without having something to empathize with, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely
Yeah.
agree.
So, well, the quote or the concept of quote place as predator is a phrase that's been used in reference to the novel. If Meadowland is a kind of predator, what does it feed on?
Hmm. So in terms of Meadowland, I feel like what it feeds on is loneliness. Well, I say loneliness because loneliness was the primary driving force behind a lot of the scenes that do take place in Meadowland, talking about the past. I'm trying not to spoil anything. Um, but I think that I kind of play into the idea of certain places taking on an attitude of the events that have occurred within the walls, like almost like so much negative energy in one place can give a place a negative personality. So much anger can make a place angry. So much same like you ever like walked into a house where like let's say a very dysfunctional family has lived or even something as bad as like an abusive family. There's like that feeling you get when you walk in like man, this place does not have a good feeling to it. It doesn't have a good sense to it or aura, whatever you want to call it. Meanwhile, there's other houses you walk into, it's like this is a warm, inviting home. And you can almost feel, that warmth when you walk in. So I think that with Meadowland being a orphanage, you think about what would have normally transpired inside of an orphanage. You talk about kids who have been abandoned, kids who have been orphaned, sometimes in horrific ways. You're talking about a lot of loneliness, a lot of questions about existence and about, think about like an 8-year-old kid that can't figure out why his mother chose drugs over him, things like that. How much negative energy could one place take before the place essentially manifests itself as a monster? And I liked the predator aspect of it because I didn't want it to be as though I didn't want it to come across like a slasher, like where it's like, oh, I take joy in doing this or I have a motive for doing this. I like the idea of being a predator, just being like, this is just what it does. Like it's not going against its nature. It just is what its nature is.
Yeah. I mean, even like, of course, the orphanage in this story was, it was not run benevolently. But
Correct.
even if a place like that is an orphanage has people that are there to help, kind people, they love the children. Still, there is, I'm sure, just this collective sense of rejection
Yeah.
or fear of abandonment. Yeah, that always breaks my heart when I think about kids going in and out of foster care. So,
Yeah, and another big part of it too was like the decision to have Meadowland be called Meadowland and being across a meadow was, my entire life I'd always thought a meadow was just this really wide, peaceful area of land with pretty grass and all that stuff. And then I learned that the vast majority of meadows may look peaceful on top, but beneath it is just this rot of wet saturation and death and things like that. Like things are dying beneath those grass like constantly. And I thought that that was a really interesting way to tie into like the idea of the orphanage. Because like you said, even if you have one that's run benevolently, where like you have people who legitimately care and who are trying their best to help, think about the psychological issues that are still happening beneath that care, beneath that effort, and what those kids are going through despite all the best efforts of people who truly do have good hearts. Obviously, that is not what happened in Meadowland, but like I think that ties into this whole notion of children and what children go through, which for me was kind of important just because I think I mentioned this to you before. Like I struggle with stories, with horror stories that deal with what like bad things happening to kids. And in that regard, this book was kind of hard to write at times just because of what that entailed.
So you're saying like a meadow, I mean the common ecosystem is like it's soil erosion. It's
Well,
nat
it's because the grass on top is basically so thick that like sunlight and heat and all that never really gets underneath it. So the ground beneath it stays wet. And it stays wet long enough where it never has like a prolonged dry period. So if it starts to kind of dry up a little bit, you'll get a rainfall and it'll soak right back into the ground. So it's like saturation. So like for instance, if you try to really walk into one of these meadows, you think you're walking through like a field of daisies or some crap like that. You're really going to be like knee deep in muck as you try to move through it.
Okay. Well, we've kind of alluded to it a little bit. The brothers don't just have different coping mechanisms, they have fundamentally different memories of the same events. So, having established that, how unreliable did you want their perspectives to be, and how much of that is the orphanage messing with them versus, or not necessarily the orphanage, but the spirit involved with it, versus just how trauma works?
I think I was definitely going for a little bit of the how trauma works aspect of it, where it was like, this is just the way that trauma can mess with your brains. But at the same time, I wanted their perspectives to be potentially unreliable, yet incredibly justified. Like I wanted you to look at what Jake has gone through and what he has seen, particularly when you get to the flashbacks of what happens to them in the foster home after, you know, they're orphaned. And I wanted you to be able to look at Jake and go, I understand why you think the way you do. And then I also wanted you to be able to watch Nate sitting in that haunted house, you know, listening to the creaks and echoes of the attitude of the place and look at his experiences and be like, I get why you feel the way you do. Because I think if both of them have that line to the truth and that connection and that understanding, like for the reader understanding about why they believe what they believe, then it makes the dynamic between the two of them stronger because you're not reading an argument where you think one person's an idiot, the other one's always right. You're reading a discussion and where it's kind of pulling you like a yin yang between two different concepts.
Gotcha. Well, readers talk about Meadowland Orphanage like it has, quote, creepy infrastructure energy, kind of like a hungry machine, as we've talked about it being a predator. Were there any real world institutions or environments you were thinking about?
In terms of orphanages, nothing specifically. Like I said before, I like to watch ghost hunting shows. It's a guilty pleasure. And a lot of times they go into like asylums, and asylums have always creeped me out. And unfortunately, many of them did have children in there, and some of them are just like heartbreaking, where it was like a family would drop their kid that they couldn't handle off and just leave. And I didn't want to do an asylum, but I was like, just the notion of abandonment works so well between both. Even outside of children. I mean, you talk about people, there were people that were left at these institutions where their families just did not want to deal with them anymore. So they just dropped them off. There's somebody else's problem. Now we leave. We wash our hands of the issue. So I like that you call Meadowland almost like a machine, because I kind of like to think of it where it is a machine, and the children are the unfortunate grease that goes between the cogs. Their suffering and their misery and all that is what makes institutions like that run. There's always going to be abandoned children. There's always going to be orphan children. We live in a world where that happens, unfortunately, far too often, even though, quite frankly, for abandonment one time is far too often. and essentially they become grease for the wheels, for the cogs, just continue rolling. It's the way that the system works. So I think that that was definitely part of it, because again, like I was trying to make a statement about the way that these institutions, even those who may have begun with the best of intentions, like what's the phrase? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to say something about that, because after you've looked up some examples of this kind of stuff, it gets very overwhelming very fast.
Well, you coach high school baseball and teach English while also parenting young children. How do you determine when you're too tired to write versus just afraid to face the page?
I'll let you know when I figure it out.
Okay.
I wish I had a better answer.
Make a social media post.
I will say this. I read an article not long ago that said that when you are tired, you are significantly more creative. And
Really?
I never thought about it, but now that I'm like, when I read that, I started thinking, I was like, I honestly think the best essays I ever wrote in college were written at like 2 a.m. the night before it was due.
But isn't that just like almost like the selection pressure of making people evolve? Isn't that just the pressure more than the fact that you're exhausted?
Yes, what was it? Diamond start as coal, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that there are times where it's like like last night I was too tired. I was like, I didn't write last night, and I was like, I had every intention of it, and at about 10:30, I was like, I am like deathly tired. Like I need to go to sleep. I haven't been sleeping enough. I need to go to sleep. And then other times there is a time where you're like, I have to figure out what the next part of this story is, and I don't know if I'm in the right mindset to figure that out. I don't know. Or, oh my God, what if I'm 55,000 words in this book and I don't know how to end it, or something along those lines. So yeah, whenever I figure out the difference between the two of those, I'll let you know.
Well,
so,
it's interesting. See, now my curiosity. Are you more creative when you are tired? Yes, studies suggest you can be more creative when tired because a fatigued brain has lower inhibition and reduced ability to focus, allowing the more diffuse, nonlinear, and unconventional thinking. This groggy state reduces the inner critic, allowing for original aha moments, especially during off-peak hours. Interesting.
I guess it kind of also ties into like, think about how much less your moral voice or your inhibitions talk to you at like 1 a.m. like you're drunk in a bar versus like the morning where you're like, why did I do that?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I just feel like when I'm tired, I just feel like after 7:00, I'm brain dead. I'll work on the show if it's just like pure editing, but like stuff where I have to actually come up with ideas, I just like, I can't do it. I operate better in the morning. At least I feel like.
I never tried to do the morning stuff. But I've heard some people swear by it. Some people don't. I don't know. But I know for me that like 11 to 1 a.m. is like prime in terms of like, that's when I'm at my most productive.
Well, speaking of that, does fatigue in particular sharpen the edge on grief scenes?
That's a good question. Maybe so, especially given what you just looked up and the idea of how it kind of lowers your inhibitions and you don't have so many constraints. Because I think when you're talking about something like grief and fiction, you're writing it down, you really you have to let it bleed a little bit. So maybe the fatigue aspect means you're more open and more willing to dive into the darker waters of what you really need to do to write those scenes, as opposed to like that voice in your head saying like, oh, is this too much, or whatever the case may be, like, oh, am I pushing this too far? Perhaps maybe fatigue removes that angel on your shoulder, or whatever the case may be, and just lets you dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're like, well, if I go to a really dark place, to hell with it. I'll just sleep it off.
Exactly.
It's not like I have to do like, okay, I'm writing before school. Now I got to go to school and pretend I'm not miserable.
I gotta put a smile on my face, like I haven't had an existential crisis for the past like 2 hours.
Yeah, like I haven't been neck deep in some pathological toxic relationship.
Yeah, I haven't been swimming in Jungian psychology.
Yeah. Why are we all here? Well, let's see here. With your background in English education, what is a quote unquote rule of good writing you knowingly break in horror because breaking it creates the right kind of dread?
Interesting. I don't do it often, but I will occasionally do like not full head hops, but small head hops. And by head hop, I don't necessarily mean jumping into another character's mindset. I mean, sometimes I'll go from like a limited perspective in a chapter to maybe like a brief moment of omniscience just to imply that something is going on in the background. Sentence fragments are always fun because who cares about punctuation or completeness? But yeah, I think that fragments are definitely fun, and then a little bit of head hopping doesn't hurt from time to time. But I think that it is important to say this, and I tell this to my students all the time: if you're going to break a rule, you better freaking know the rule. Because if you don't know the rule and you're breaking it for no reason, then whatever effect that you think this is going to have, it's not going to have that because you don't know what you're doing. It's going to read like it just feels like bad grammar as opposed to, wow, that was impactful.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever read Hubert Selby Jr.?
I have not.
You know who he is?
I know who he is. Yeah, okay. I have read him.
He would use forward slashes instead of apostrophes.
Oh, you and I have talked about this before, I think.
Oh, have we?
Yeah, because we talked. We were talking about it when we talked about Cormac McCarthy a couple years ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this allowed him to type faster on his manual typewriter without holding down the shift key. And the complete omission of quotation marks for dialogue. And he used a lot of fragmented sentences to mirror the chaotic minds of his characters, which his characters were fucked up. So
yeah, Requiem for a Dream fits that bill.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry, I didn't remember that I brought that up before, but
no, it was when you said a forward slash that jogged my memory. I was like, yeah.
It's interesting how some people have their own unique style, but yeah, it makes sense. I mean, he's not just using a forward slash; he knows what goes there.
Exactly. Yes, it's a substitution that he was like, I like it; it's my style. But and it's kind of like I say this to people, like when you read Cormac McCarthy, for instance, the first time you look at his stuff, it's kind of jarring. It is like when there's no quotation marks and all that stuff. By about page 10, you're in the rhythm. You know exactly what's going on. You're not having a hard time telling who's talking and who's not. You adapt. And because you're adapting, I feel like the emphasis kind of stays there. I think a great example of that is like The Road, where that is a book where if you really think about it, it is stripped down misery. And because everything is so, even the prose and the punctuation, all that is stripped away, what you're left with is the act that he is describing on the page. And it hits that much harder because it just feels so much, I guess, closer.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. I don't know if that ever happened with me with Blood Meridian, though. That was a trek, but it has the best line ever. You know, the judge, he's like, he exists without my knowledge, therefore he exists without my consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope I'm not butchering that, but that's what I remember it being. That might be the phenomenon we were talking about earlier.
I think he nailed. Well, yeah, it's just, that's a book that I've read it twice, and it's one where I acknowledge the brilliance of it. It is at times very dense. It's not my favorite McCarthy, but I can openly say that the ideas and concepts in that story are utter brilliance.
Rest in power, Cormac. Well, let's see here. Dual timelines appear frequently in your work. What does the structural fracture of cutting between past and present give you psychologically that a linear timeline can't access?
I feel like it's a great way to get information into the narrative that otherwise would have to be told through like dialogue or something of something of that sort. Which I don't want to do. Like I don't like writing scenes of dialogue where the character is just like, well, this happened 10 years ago. And like for instance, the whole thing with Brittany McNamara's scene in Porcelain Lullaby is, yeah, I could have easily just had her tell Nate and Jake, oh, this happened back in 1977. I was like, why in the world would I do that when I could just have a scene set in 1977 and you can see it? Or I could have had Jake and Nate. Plus, I think a big part of this is of what makes Jake's story specifically noteworthy, in my opinion, is the allusion to the crowbar throughout the entire story. And you follow along the 1997 timeline until you find out why that matters so much to him. And it's a payoff. There's a reward to, following the breadcrumbs. So I think that's always been why I did it. It gives a new glimpse into a character. I use the flashback scenes to try to explain things that maybe were just hinted at in the present tense scenes. And I've always said that's the kind of stories that I like. Perfect example is that is like Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House. You have the dual timeline of the adults and the kids. And unlike something like actually it's a great example is like Stephen King's It. Like when you read It, the adult and children timelines are interwoven. Whereas, so basically something happens to the adults and then the 1958 segments kind of explain, okay, well, what's the importance of that? Why does that matter? And then the movies, when they tried to split it up into two movies where it was like one movie was the children, one movie was the adult, you lose the effect because it's just a linear timeline in each movie. I'm not seeing the flashbacks. To me, I feel like it, other authors could probably pull it off. To me, I prefer to do the dual method.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a lot cleaner and a lot more enjoyable to know what the person's talking about instead of having to gather around the campfire and listen to this expository speech about, oh, this is what happened back, 20 years ago. Now what you're here to talk to me about today, this is how it's associated. And,
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you do not care much for fiction stories about harm befalling children. You're a father of young children while writing about parental death and orphan siblings. How do you compartmentalize the work so it doesn't bleed into how you view your own family's safety and fragility?
I'll let you know when I figure that out.
All right.
Like, because I'll be honest with you, like a lot of the fears that I write about, because again, I've had a lot of people be like, well, Blaine, like, are you okay? Like, is your child? My childhood was great. I had a good childhood, but I also am raising kids in a world that scares the shit out of me. I'm a teacher, and unfortunately, a part of being a teacher is you get some real horror stories, and by horror stories, I don't mean like, oh, these kids are so bad. I mean these like, oh my God, you poor child. Like this is what you're dealing with, and you meet parents where you're like, I'll be damned if I ever turn into that, or if I ever treat my child in that way. And then, of course, you talk about like you hear about news articles about parents who. I recently read an article about a 4-year-old who drowned because their mother walked off to get a drink at the bar for 30 minutes while they're in a pool.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, well, they have a floaty, it's okay. It's like, what do you mean? Like even to the point where it's like our car has like a little sensor where when we stop the car and we turn it off, if my son is in the back seat, a little message will flash and it'll say, check rear seat before you're leaving. And I know people have like complained about that function. Like, oh, of course I'm going to check the rear seat. Like, really? Because a whole bunch of freaking people don't. So in a lot of ways, even with Jake, like Jake's early issues with how he's talking to his kids and he knows he's doing it. That's what scares him. that's very reflective of me, because there have been plenty of times where I've come home from a bad day and I've snapped and I've been like, what the hell are you doing, dude? Like, they didn't do anything. Like, why are you raising your voice at the 7-year-old? He didn't talk in your class. Like, so I think that I'm not 100% sure if I've managed to compartmentalize it at all. I think it kind of bleeds pretty freely, which I think can be good. I know it can be bad. It can also be good. It's a very, like, I try to be self-aware about it and try to look at them as like you can't control the world. You can't control what other people are doing. You can't control how other parents are caring for their children. The most you can do is do your best, look at the negative examples and promise to yourself, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, it's one thing to leave your child in floaties in a pool unattended while you go get loaded or something like that, but the censor when it comes to leaving the possibility of leaving your kid in the back, the rat race, just the 9 to 5, just having 90 things going in your brain, that can make completely competent, intelligent people do dumb shit.
Yes. And that's why I get irritated when people are like, I'm so, what's it hurting? Mm-hmm. What is it hurting you? Is that one extra little bing so just nausea inducing that you can't, oh yeah, he's like my baby who's been sleeping for the past 15 minutes of this drive, I'm locked into my quietude. Like, yeah, you should remember that they're back there. Like, I don't see the harm in that, and I don't see why we have to complain about it.
Yeah. Well, would you like to read a passage from the book?
Sure. Let me turn my kitchen light on so I can actually see the pages.
You have an incredibly solid background with really
it's just a wall.
Well, no. But it's a solid light color that contrasts with you perfectly. I could insert something really crazy behind you.
Oh, do it. Go for it. Okay, so the scene that I'll read is from the opening prologue of the book, where a trucker is driving down a long and lonely highway through the Pennsylvania woods and stumbles across something in the street. Another roll of thunder, this one louder, made him nervous. It wasn't the loss of visibility brought on by a potential storm that concerned him the most. The darkness of night was already heavy enough. What did concern him was the sound. His eyelids were growing heavier by the minute, and the rhythmic lullaby of rainfall would certainly overcome his determination and put him to sleep. If it rains, he thought, I'll just pull over on the shoulder and sleep there. If push comes to shove, I'd rather be late and fired than dead. But as tired as he was, he didn't want to stop. Not here. He'd driven this road plenty of times over the years, and there was nothing wrong with it during the day. It was a pleasant drive, often traffic-free, and the views of the vast Appalachian wilderness were more than enough to soothe his tired mind and remind him, even for a small moment, that there were some perks to this job. But night was a different story. The air here felt charged, as though a current shot through it the second the sun went down. Even inside the truck, Marcus felt the weight bearing down his shoulders, and he couldn't shake the feeling that every inch he traveled was watched by studious eyes hidden in the trees. And then there was the orphanage. It sat at the end of one of the long meadows, and thus was aptly named Meadowland Orphanage. He had little knowledge of Meadowland, or any other orphanage for that matter, outside of the sympathy for the poor children stuck inside, waiting for homes. Other drivers had commented that if you got elevation and looked really hard, you could make out the outline far in the distance. But Marcus himself had never seen it, never even felt the inclination to try. But even though he'd never seen it, for some reason, he could always feel the presence of the place when he drove down this long, lonely highway. It hadn't always been like that. This little stretch of road never used to elicit the same feelings it did now. It was only during the past year that things changed. And he wasn't the only one who felt it. He'd seen the faces of truckers who'd stopped at the rest station in Erie after driving down this very road. He'd seen the bleached look on their face and heard the simmering nerves in their voice when they said how there was something different about the air when he drove by the place, like it was charged with an energy that wasn't present in other parts of the state. Each mile felt contested, as though you were being held back by a lonely child's hand, begging you not to leave. And the stories some of them told, stories of being watched from the trees as they passed by, stories of glimmering eyes shining from the woods that choked the road into a continuous dark path. Had it not been night, and if he hadn't been terrified that looking into the trees would reveal dozens of glowing eyes looking back, he might well have seen Meadowland slumped off in the distance, watching him as he passed. He gripped the steering wheel and took another long gulp of coffee, grimacing as he swallowed the bitter liquid. He could not wait to get past this part of the drive. Enough was enough. Whenever he reached Black Ridge, he would stop and check into the local motel. Delivery schedule be damned. If he got fired, so be it. He was tired and needed sleep. More than that, he needed to get off this stretch of road. Then, a small figure walked out into the farthest stretch of his headlights.
Awesome, sir. Appreciate that. Well done. One of these days, you're going to have to do your own, as if you have time for anything additional. Well, I know you're a busy man. Have there been any life-changing events since we last spoke?
Not life-changing. One of the biggest ones was the changeover in my publisher from just being a single-owned indie press to now being owned by both Andrew Nyberg and Joe Hempel, and with Athon Books backing them as the primary publisher, which has been absolutely incredible. Porcelain Lullaby was by far my most successful launch, and what they have done in the short time that they've, been in control has been absolutely incredible. Plus, I'm not going to lie, having Andrew in charge means I can kind of manipulate some things. That's nice to know. Not really. He's not really.
No, he's not a pushover.
No, he's not.
Yeah, I mean, Wicked House has just been a powerhouse since it began. I mean, I've had so many authors from that press. I think there's only been a couple that I haven't. I don't know why. I should just go to the website and just start going through each one. Whoever began it has an incredible eye for talent, and it's just going to continue now that Nyberg is attached to it. And who else did you say it was?
Joe Hempel, the audio.
Oh, Joe Hempel.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, they were able to sign this month alone, the first three books that got released under the Athon Wicked House banner is Porcelain Lullaby was number 2. The first one was Nick Roberts' Lila in the Flesh, and Nick is just an absolute machine. John Combs' Creed Falls Massacres, I'm
so glad he joined up with them.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah. John's great. So, I mean, just myself excluded, coming out the gate like that with Nick and John, not to, me, like I said, excluded, that's just incredible.
Yeah. And Joe Hempel was the owner from the beginning, right?
No, Patrick Rubin was the owner from the beginning. Joe Hempel runs, I think, Fright Night Audio.
Uh-huh.
And then he and Andrew, he has basically been just about the go-to voice for indie horror for a while now. And then I know that at Books and Brews last year, I think he had kind of talked to a lot of people and talked to Andrew, and I don't know the exact details of it, obviously, but things kind of got the ball rolling. And man, what a ride it's been just these last couple months.
Well, we all look forward to what's to come from Wicked House Publishing. Well, Blaine, as always, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me back again.
Absolutely. So as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug, reiterate, or let your readers know about?
Yeah. So as always, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Blaine Daigle Author. I will be at Scares I Care AuthorCon the end of February. I'm also going to be at ShiverCon in August. And in the next couple of months, I don't know the exact date, but I have a short story titled The River Dog in Broken Brain Books' Screams from the Bayou collection. So if you liked A Dark Rue and you always wanted me to go back to Louisiana for a story, there you go. I don't know the exact day off the top of my head, but that's coming up fairly soon from, like I said, Ellen Kaplan and Heather Ann Larson did it. I'm super pumped about that. I think that's probably my favorite short story I've ever written. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else at this current moment. I know that I'm working on a collaborative novel with William Gray. We're kind of figuring out how we want that to all finish up, but that's pretty much it.
Right. Sounds good. Well, listeners at home, all links are in the description. And Blaine, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you again for having me.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest authors and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.